I want to tell you a little bit about Porto Charities, and we are a nonprofit. We're based in the Diocese of Arlington, and we focus on promoting inclusive Catholic education for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, as well as meaningful employment. We know that our families and family members and friends that have intellectual and developmental disabilities have so much to offer us, and we want to make it easier for them to be a part of our society and to join us in our schools and workplaces. So to help us, here we have Mr. Joey Clem, and he is a BCBA, and he is going to tell us all about ABA, and he's going to provide us a way to look at it from our Catholic perspective. So I encourage you all to go to our website, check out our YouTube channel at Porto Charities. We'll be putting this in the chat, and we really just encourage you to see all the things that we have to offer, all the special webinars and different things that we've done. And if you are local to the area, we do hope you'll join us in one of our events and to be a partner with us. So right now, as we're getting started here, if you want to go ahead and write your name, what your connection is to this topic, and tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, into the chat, that would be great. We're going to take most of the questions in the chat, and then we will hopefully get to them at the end. So please go ahead, feel free to do that as we're getting introduced and as we're getting started. And for that, Mr. Joey Clem, please take it away. Thank you so much. And you're gonna have to unmute yourself. I think you're gonna be okay. Yeah.
Yep. That's right. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Awesome. And because it's going to be hard for me to look at the chat box while I'm talking. Okay. Because it'll be harder for me to look at the chat box while I'm presenting, I just wanted to sneak a peek at just some of where people are coming from. Virginia, lots of Virginia, California, Kansas City, Missouri, California. Wow. Great to see you all. Thank you so much for being here. Awesome. All right, Carmen, I know you said we're good, but just double checking. Are we good? Oh, you're muted. Oh, we're good? Okay, thank you. All right. Well, let's begin in prayer then. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Let's pray together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Again, thank you so much for being here, everybody. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with you and with our host, Porto Charities, which is doing really critical work in the church, especially within our Catholic education system, working towards inclusion. Also, thank you to Dr. Jane Barbin, Carmen Chiappetta, who's here, and my wife, Rachel, who provided a lot of helpful feedback to make this content that we're going to be going over a lot more useful and a lot more accessible. Because some of the things will be dense, but like Carmen mentioned, we're really going to be getting into the practicals in the next couple of episodes after this. But I'm going to sprinkle in some real life examples while we're talking about this stuff tonight. Again, my name is Joey Clem. I do go by Joey, and I'm a Catholic husband to my wife of over 10 years. We have 4 kids, and they're almost 9 and under. And I'm also a lifetime member of the Catholic Community of Youth Apostles based here in Northern Virginia and serving young people in youth ministry. I've been working since 2011 in Virginia with children, adolescents, and adults with Down syndrome, autism, any kind of related diagnoses to those. Primarily, I'm working with kids with autism now. I became a board certified behavior analyst in 2016. And I'm currently licensed under the Virginia Board of Medicine as a licensed behavior analyst. And as of last year, I'm also a certified behavioral sleep practitioner. And that's been fun to help out the families with some sleep-related issues. Nowadays, I am primarily working with 2 to 12-year-olds in an ABA clinic, and that means, and also in the clients' homes. and especially focus on early intervention. And that's about 2 to 4 years old. So most of my clients are in that 2 to 4 or 5 age range. And that's the time frame of development that the research is showing. That's a really good time to be doing ABA. But ABA we'll be discussing can encompass all of the ages when you're wanting to help support somebody. The main activities that I do are assessments, supervision of the behavior technicians who are doing direct behavior therapy, including mentoring new behavior analysts. That's a joy that I have to be able to do that. Parent or caregiver support. That's an honor to be able to accompany these families and work with them on what practical steps they can take in the home setting. That also can involve supporting teachers. And then lastly, treatment planning. And I need to be looking in the books. I need to be looking at the graphs and what is the behavior data telling me and what decisions do I need to make. That's a little bit of what I do. So the objectives of this 3-part webinar are here. I'm not going to get into it for the sake of time because I did time myself and I want to shorten the time that I originally told Carmen. So it's in your handouts though. But the big thing we're going to be focused on there is conceptualize ABA through a Catholic lens. That one right there, and a general overview of ABA. The first 2 bullet points, we're really focused in on that today. Part 1, ABA and Catholicism. What is applied behavior analysis, and how can we understand it better through the lens of our Catholic faith? That's the big question for today. Questions was already mentioned, but put it in the chat box, write it down, whatever is helpful for you. And I'm going to do my best to answer at the end. If something is pertinent, maybe Carmen, if you could keep an eye on the chat. If you think that a question is really worth interrupting whatever I'm talking about, I'm all for it. But I want to start with a question for you all. What comes to your mind when you hear the word ABA? Or behavior analysis? And you can go ahead, and this time I'm actually going to be looking in the chat box to see what some people are saying, just to kind of get this conversation going. Behavioral intervention, autism, shaping. Ooh, that's a deep cut. That's a very technical term in our field. Good. Autism treatment, applied behavior therapy. Excellent. Generality, effective time. Okay, somebody's a behavior analyst. It's in there. Oh gosh, now I'm nervous. All right, severe emotional disorders. Okay, interesting. Behavior modification. Okay. All right. Those are great. People can feel free to continue responding. The second question, though, also is what reservations or concerns do you have about applied behavior analysis when you hear that, if you do have any? Special needs techniques, ABC, data, keeping it natural. I take it that's a concern. That's a good concern to have. Keeping it natural, how to implement it, who's going to implement it, having the right resources to be able to do it, knowing effective actions to help. Excellent. Consistency, application of tools. These are excellent. Yeah, you're going to love what we're going to talk about later then, and in the next episode, because that's already prepared and ready to go. Forcing a behavior that isn't natural for the child. That's good. Thank you for saying that. What are you hoping to take away from today or in the upcoming parts of this series? Behavior analysis, watching their behavior, better able to support my teachers, refresher. Yeah, because some people here probably have heard about ABA. Maybe just wanting more practicals on how to implement, articulating how ABA and Catholicism intersect. Better supporting students and teachers, having a better understanding of the subject, understanding and informing parents. Part of me wants to stop the presentation. We just all workshop together on these things. This is great. How to appreciate God's special gifts. Yep. Beautiful. All right. Even though I want to just keep reading these, I got to go back to the slides. But these are great things, and I'm really excited to unpack more of these things with you all. It's helpful to get a sense of who I'm talking to, since you're all these numerous black screens, and it makes it a little less personal. So it's like, I hope that I can be answering these questions for you all. All right. So I do want to give a little bit of testimony on how I even got involved in this, because it's going to help for those that are not as familiar with ABA. How does somebody even get into this? I was at the dining facility at George Mason University. That's where I went to get my bachelor's and then my master's. And an advertisement showed up on one of the TV screens in there, and there was nothing spectacular about it. It was plain white font, blue screen, and no pictures. It just said minor in applied behavior analysis. And I was very excited about that because I was doing a minor in a criminal justice at the time. And I was like, oh, I could do a double minor. And then I could, I don't know, do what I see on Criminal Minds or Law and Order SVU, because those were my main shows that I liked to watch. And my excitement started there. And I'm thinking about law enforcement and being a forensic psychologist, behavioral profiling of serial killers. Long story short, I was tricked. That is not what happened. I got hoodwinked. So I enrolled in one of the first classes for ABA in the fall of 2010. And I quickly learned that it was not going to be profiling killers or psychoanalyzing criminals. The first class was theoretical and foundational. I was lucky enough to have a great professor named Dr. Hoke, and he taught with a really great dry wit, and he made it very fun and engaging. I hope I can, I don't know, take some of his energy and put it into this presentation tonight with that. And I didn't think too much of it at the time, but the examples he was giving mostly had to do with working with kids with autism. I didn't think too much of it, but I probably was like, oh, this makes sense. This is what I want to do anyways. Since high school, I had wanted to be a child or adolescent psychologist. So if I could summarize, though, what I learned in that introductory class, and I think it's something we can take for granted, is that all behaviors happen for a reason, even if we cannot see that reason. So maybe there are moments like that behavior just came out of nowhere. But all behaviors happen for a reason, even if we cannot see that reason. There was an internship experience that was part of the minor. And so I started in the spring of 2011. I was assigned to be supervised by a very kind and supportive and knowledgeable behavior analyst named Robin Moyer. And now she's Dr. Moyer. She introduced me for the first time to children with autism who were receiving ABA or applied behavior analysis therapy or services. So she very patiently taught me how to teach skills effectively and efficiently. She also taught me how to identify the reasons or functions behind the different behaviors that I was seeing. And then together we would make changes to the kids' world and their surroundings in order to help them better. I taught children how to communicate effectively, to do daily living skills more independently, and to be more resilient to everyday changes to their routines. From experiences of supporting the families in this way as a one-on-one ABA therapist, to teaching the kids how to talk for the first time, I was hooked. So I was no longer hoodwinked, I was hooked. And I fell in love with the field of ABA from then onward. Fast forward, God kept opening the doors for pursuing ABA through the following years, and I came to love what I was doing even more. And I continued to enjoy how effective the approach is for helping people, and how quickly results would come as long as the analysis of behaviors was accurate and the interventions were related to what the analysis said. Then it went well. It went really good. That was bad English. And I'm talking to a lot of educators here. Now I'm self-conscious, but I'm still passionate about studying the intersection of psychology and behavior analysis. But nowadays, I'm even more passionate about examining the intersection of behavior analysis with my Catholic faith. So first, what is ABA? Very short definition. You never define a word with words that are part of the name, but I'm going to break that rule. The analysis of behavior. What is applied behavior analysis? The analysis of behavior applied to socially significant behavior. So I'm just going to name one from each of the next several slides. So here's some brief examples, because sometimes it's just helpful to talk about examples. A little girl hits her head against the floor when she's denied having ice cream. The parents change their strategy from giving ice cream to teaching her to accept alternative choices after being told no, and or to tolerate waiting from several seconds all the way to waiting for 24 hours, waiting until tomorrow for the ice cream. Again, these are going to be in your handout slides, so you'll have a copy of this to go back to. A 2-year-old newly diagnosed with autism receives ABA to help with global developmental delays, such as eating with a utensil, getting dressed, and using the bathroom. A toddler learns her first words by pairing language systematically with positive experiences. And there's many, 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 many other examples of how ABA is applied to skills and also to reducing challenging behaviors that can affect quality of life. So there are technical definitions. We don't need to spend a lot of time on this because we're going to make a more accessible definition together. But some key points here: behavior analysis is the science of behavior. So it makes the claim, that attempts to improve the human condition through behavior change, trying to change behavior, will be most effective if behavior itself is the primary focus. Applied behavior analysis is the science in which tactics derived from that science are applied systematically to socially significant behavior. And then it says a bunch of other words. We're going to unpack that, but this is dense stuff, but I wanted to make sure you had the official definitions if you are into that, if you are into the heavy jargon. So where did this science come from? It came from a few sources: behavioral psychology, physiology, evolutionary sciences. But the founding father we would regard as our founding father would be B.F. Skinner. And I'm really curious to hear what people's experiences are with having learned about B.F. Skinner. But I can't look at the chat box right now. So we're going to save that for, I guess, at the end if somebody wants to share their thoughts. But he said some good things. Over time, especially through the work of Ole Ivar Lovaas in the 1970s and the 1980s, ABA has come to be focused on treatment of individuals with autism. I keep looking this way, by the way, because the slide shows here. So right there, in the 70s and 80s, you're seeing, okay, there's this move towards working with kids with autism. This actually brings us to the first of what I'm going to call Mythbusters. And there's going to be, assuming that things stay the same, 10 total Mythbusters across the 3 episodes. You have to watch all 3 parts of the webinar series if you want to see all of the Mythbusters. ABA Mythbuster number 1, ABA is only for children with autism. ABA is not synonymous with autism treatment or a bag of strategies. ABA is a science that applies to all human and animal behavior. Serving individuals with autism is the most popular application of ABA. Some of you put that in the chat box, autism. Yeah, it is the most popular application of ABA, but it's not the only one. So ABA does have evidence-based strategies, but it's more than this also. Here we go. So applications of ABA, according to the Behavior Analyst Certification Board, that's my credentialing board, includes the following: autism and other developmental disabilities. It's not just alphabetically correct, it's also the most popular. Behavioral gerontology, so that's serving the elderly. Behavioral pediatrics, behavioral sports psychology, a number of different ones here. but you can look at on your own time. Substance use disorders, addressing those. There's some really cool things being done in the field of behavior analysis. Still, autism treatment is the most common application of ABA at this time. We get a twofer, 2 myth busters in a row. It's not always going to be like this. ABA myth number 2, ABA cures autism. It does not. ABA has sometimes helped children to increase their behavioral flexibility, which is one of the core symptoms of autism. There's 2 in the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic manual that helps pediatricians and developmental psychologists and the like diagnose autism. I don't diagnose autism. Somebody else does. And but there are 2 core symptoms. One is the behavioral flexibility piece, restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior. And the second one is social communication deficits. So sometimes ABA is provided, and to the point that the child no longer meets diagnostic criteria, but it's misleading to call it a cure. So in a review by the APA, potential predictors for losing a diagnosis, or at least to go on to function well, were the following. Starting out with a higher IQ, so higher baseline, better language skills, fewer repetitive behaviors, and greater ability to engage in imaginary or symbolic play than other children with ASD. So it's like learning to learn skills, prerequisite skills. If you start off with a higher baseline, it makes sense. You've got more of a chance of getting to the point where you don't meet criteria anymore. In the same review of research by the APA, they examined longitudinal studies concerning children with autism, and they found that while 7% of children who maintained ASD symptoms had received intensive ABA, so they received intensive ABA, between ages 2 and 3, 56% of children who had lost the diagnosis had received the therapy. So we're seeing some kids lost the diagnosis for other reasons. 56% of them had received ABA therapy. About 37% of children in a recent study who received services, and this is a direct quote, mostly applied behavior analysis, no longer had the diagnosis between ages 5 and 7. The predictors of non-persistent ASD, so the autism spectrum disorder that keeps going, were having a higher baseline of adaptive skills and being female. At least just speaking to the adaptive skills side, again, if you've got more of a baseline skills that will help you learn more skills, it makes sense that that's going to be a predictor. Now, there's some implications here. This is why I'm sharing it with you. Not that ABA is going to be a cure, because I just said it's not, but I'm sharing this with you because I think this puts a heavy responsibility on Catholic educators. This means that those that work with the youngest ages have an obligation to share concerns with families as quickly as possible, so they can receive appropriate services that can help the family out. Perhaps it would be good to reflect on how we as a church are helping families screen for milestones, more knowledgeable about milestones in general as well. In Catholic education, especially in the preschools, we will speak more about it later, but don't wait for a Catholic behavior analyst to refer for services. Eventually, over time, I believe that clergy and Catholic schools and the wider community of faith are going to be able to refer good providers based on their own experiences with those people. If there's ABA companies that claim that the therapy is a cure, this is getting back to the myth that it's a cure. If you see an organization that claims that, or gives false hope by making it sound common that a child can improve so much that they shed the diagnosis, I work with families that want that diagnosis to go away. So just that is a thing. It's actually irresponsible for that organization to frame it in that way. And it's a misrepresentation of ABA. Instead, what they should do is try to provide the best available statistics regarding outcomes, like I'm trying to do right now. Furthermore, the term cure implies pathology. So some of you are already saying, like, how does this ABA stuff intersect with the faith? Okay, regardless of whether or not you regard autism as a pathology, which to be to say it's an illness that we in our faith life would accept in humble trust while celebrating the good that still comes out of the situation and the innate goodness of the person, right? Or as biodiversity, like some people will say, is that it's actually an objective good that my child has autism and thus should be celebrated. Because there are people that believe that, and I've worked with those parents as well. ABA is not in the business of curing medical diagnoses. So I don't get into that with the families. What I'm in the business of is trying to teach skills and change the learning environment to help that individual choose to do pro-social and healthy behaviors instead of isolating and unhealthy behaviors. So we don't behavior analysts, we don't diagnose medical conditions. We diagnose functions of behavior, so the reasons behind the behaviors. We accompany in a therapeutic relationship, and then we increase behaviors that are helpful and work to help reduce the behaviors that are unhelpful. So on the note of reducing and increasing behaviors, we'll start with what kind of behaviors are we trying to reduce in my field? So some common ones that we will try to reduce: self-injurious behaviors. Hopefully we'd all be in agreement that that would be something to reduce. Physically harming others. Again, of course we would all agree that. Property destruction, public sexual behaviors, pica, which is eating inedible objects. I've worked on that behavior. Spitting at others, screaming, elopement, encroaching others' personal space, verbal abuse. I've worked on all these and other behaviors to reduce. And that brings us to ABA myth number 3. ABA only addresses problem behaviors. So we do address problematic behaviors. But it would be, I'm going to use the word irresponsible again. It would be irresponsible for us as behavior analysts to reduce them without providing some replacement behavior. For this reason, behavior analysts work on just as much, if not more, the increase of skills. Again, we're in the business of teaching. Behaviors targeted for increase. This is the good stuff. Verbal behavior, play skills, desensitization, social skills, flexibility, acceptance, present moment awareness, daily living skills, academics, emotional self-regulation training. Did you know that there is a behavior analytic approach to academics? So if you've heard of things like precision teaching or direct instruction or personalized system of instruction, for you educators out there, there is a science to teaching that you can tap into that's evidence-based. But why use ABA to address these behaviors? Many disciplines address these same issues. We have special education, speech therapy, occupational therapy, psychology, counseling, equine therapy. I mean, we've got it all. There's so many therapies out there. Why should we bother looking into this yet another discipline? I would say something that's distinct is that ABA has a commitment to the scientific method so that we can more precisely address the difficulties experienced by the people we serve. So there's 3 levels to which we can know something scientifically, and it's going to come full circle. Why are we doing this refresher of 6th grade science? You'll see in a second. All right, description, prediction, and control. Starting off with description, this is just us simply describing what we see. We form, Here we say, here's what's going on. And an example might be, okay, I see Johnny is told to transition from one place to another, and he drops to the ground, which either delays or prevents him from going to the location. Maybe parents here are thinking about home life. Maybe teachers are thinking about school life and going from one classroom to the other. He gets a lot of verbal encouragement from adults trying to get him to transition. You take some baseline data on the frequency, how many times he's dropping to the ground, across how many days, duration, how long is he staying on the ground, or how long does it take him to get to the other room? Those things matter. And which transitions evoke the most dropping, or occasion, or trigger the most dropping. So in that example, we're just describing what we see. That's it. We're not predicting. We're not intervening. We're not trying to gain some kind of functional control of what's going on. We're just describing. Now we move into prediction. So we predict. Here's what we think will happen. We form a hypothesis. We make a change in the environment. And then we see, was there a change in the behavior? That's it. Prediction. If we do the following treatment package, we predict that Johnny's drops will reduce. So we give as much undivided attention as possible for 5 minutes before and after a transition. We enrich his attention for the day. We use a visual schedule to show him where he's going next. We provide undivided attention at the next location and provide a preferred activity. We don't talk to Johnny while he's dropped on the ground, but we remind him once per minute, hey, I'm still here to support you. I'm looking forward to playing and talking at the next place. Let me know if you need anything. I'm right here. And then you remind him again after another minute. And then after a time for 3 weeks, the drops reduce to 0. And by the final week, across all 5 days, it's 0. Congratulations. However, these findings are only correlative if it stays at this level, meaning it's predictive. Okay, there's some degree of, okay, there's a relationship here, potentially. We would say there's a negative correlation for those that care about the statistical terminology, between these two things, this treatment package and Johnny dropping less. As the treatment package went up, the dropping went down. As my attention to him went up, the dropping went down. However, we can extend this level of knowing to control. And I put that caveat kind of, right? Because we don't control people. We don't even control behavior per se. We can influence it. And that this is where it intersects with our faith, because we believe in free will. We're going to get into some of that later tonight. But the control piece, we could also just call it a functional relationship, if that is better, more palatable for you. Here's what we think will happen. And here is how we can show it was specifically because of what we did that we actually saw a difference in the behavior. It is not because of something else that was going on in Johnny's life.
They're hiding behind the tree over there.
So what do we need to do in order to show that it was because of our intervention and not because Johnny had an out-of-town family member staying with them for the past month and his life was absolutely amazing. And then all of a sudden that out-of-town family member leaves and goes back to wherever they were, and now Johnny's dropping again. Oh my gosh, the intervention stopped working. What happened? So here's a way to do that is you can remove the treatment package. Stop doing your intervention. See what happens. Or you can try to only intervene in one transition that he's got at the school. Maybe it's specifically from music class back to the classroom, but he's also dropping in a couple of other transitions. Don't intervene with the other transitions, but just intervene with that one transition. Again, you'll have these slides. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go through reading all this, but if you read through this, you'll see how you could up your game with being able to determine, are my staff doing something that's effective, or are they doing something that's just correlative with success? So in order to have that better assurance of, okay, I'm doing something that's actually helping this kid or my own kid, you can do things like that to show that functional control or that functional relationship between your intervention and the target behavior, whether the skills that you're trying to increase or the challenging behaviors you're trying to decrease. All right, moving on. The major philosophical assumption of ABA is radical behaviorism. There are multiple philosophical assumptions. This is the major one, and for the sake of time, we cannot go into all the other ones. I'd love to, because I like nerding out about these things. But this is the important one to mention because let's listen to this definition. A form of behaviorism that attempts to understand all human behavior, including private events such as thoughts and feelings. I've underlined that. In terms of controlling variables in the history of the person and the species. So again, you see that sprinkle of how it's influenced by the evolutionary sciences. Well, I underline the thoughts and feelings because, somebody mentioned emotional disorder in the chat box. What do they think of when they hear ABA? Which I thought was really interesting. But most people would say like thoughts and feelings are not part of ABA as much. However, it's coming up. Another ABA myth buster. ABA only looks at external behaviors, the things that we can see. Well, that's a myth. ABA can and does consider private events such as thoughts and feelings during treatment. I need to consider the thoughts and feelings of my client in order to be more effective. In contrast, the belief that anything unobservable does not exist is actually proper to folks that are called structuralists, who only describe behavior, and then methodological behaviorists who experiment, but only with publicly observable events. But with me, like I could have a client who talks and can self-report on their thoughts and feelings. And that could be a measure that I use to check on how effective the intervention is for helping that kid work through their own thoughts and feelings. Those in ABA are trained instead to have a radical behaviorist perspective by including private events only experienced by the self as behaviors. So thinking and feeling. B.F. Skinner, he called it private events beneath the skin. It's a weird way to say it, I know, but that's the way he said it. And the distinction he argues is that thoughts and feelings do not cause behavior, but rather they also are behaviors. Behavior typically means something you can see and something you're doing with your hands, something you can do with your body motorically or physically with your muscles that you can see on the outside. But we don't often talk about our thoughts and feelings as behaviors. So we're going to nuance some of that through our Catholic lens later. I keep saying later. It's going to happen. We're going to get to the fun stuff in a moment. But now we need to get into the dimensions of ABA because we had a very dense definition of ABA. We've talked about the scientific method. We've talked about, what did we just talk about? Oh, yeah, the philosophical assumption of radical behaviorism. So now we're going to go back to that technical definition. We're going to unpack that and have a really good handle on what is ABA, where does it come from, and how is it going to be the foundation for using it well moving forward into episodes 2 and 3 of the webinar series. These are the 7 or 8 dimensions. There's a mystery dimension number 8, which we're going to get to. Classically, it's 7, but there is an 8th one that has been in the works for a long time and is now being promulgated, I think that's the right way to say it, as an official dimension moving forward in our field. The first one is behavioral. It's the behavior is the focus. When Johnny is not transitioning from one location to another, we don't say he's just stubborn. Sometimes hear that when I'm consulting with schools or with parents, like he's just being stubborn. Now, I might say the same thing about my own kid. So there's no ivory tower here, all right? But stubbornness is not a behavior. I can't work with that. I'm sunk if that's why he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. But if we define it and we say saying no to specific instructions is a behavior, dropping to the ground is a behavior, walking to a designated location is a behavior. I can work with that. I can positively reinforce these things. I can provide visual supports for that thing. I can work with that. Stubbornness, I can't do anything with that. Applied. We're focused on not just behavior, but important behavior. We're not focused on rats pressing levers, which is more of the experimental analysis of behavior, like laboratory settings kind of approach. And we also need to be looking at if the behaviors are beneficial to the person that we're working with, or is it just for everybody else to be more comfortable? So that's something for us to ponder. Like when we're trying to teach a new skill, is this to make everybody else comfortable, or is it actually going to help this person be more integrated into the wider community and help them to be more independent and self-managing, etc.? Important for who? That's not to say that they're totally mutually exclusive. They often overlap. That's something to just consider. We have an ethical responsibility to work on behaviors that are good for the good of the client. That's a discernment process. The ABA Mythbuster number 5. ABA only focuses on conformity or assimilation, being the same as everybody else. Just because something is socially conventional, it does not make it automatically a socially significant behavior for that client. Or at the very least, it doesn't make it a top priority. So what makes something a priority? That's something for you all to think about. Why or by what rubric are you determining, in collaboration with your school, in collaboration with the parent, in collaboration with the religious education department, what is the thing to help this kid with or young adult with, for those that have older individuals that they're working with? Well, I'm going to share my own 2 cents on that, but the guiding principles that I would use when I'm discussing with families and clients would include what's going to help incorporate the client's interests and values, because the intervention is going to be a lot more enjoyable for everyone involved if it's going to include more of what the person cares about. Kind of goes without saying, right? But we need to say it because we need to remind ourselves when we're looking at how to help somebody. Self-regulation, self-advocacy, self-management. Those are values to consider when we're looking at how to help somebody meaningfully relate to the people that matter. What's going to help them to be more integrated and included, and also live more independently, more generally. What's going to increase their independence? All right. I'm going to skip a few things here. All right. Carmen's going to be so happy. Like, she's had to read through the whole unedited and unabridged version of the presentation. All right. Effective. Behavioral changes are significant. So we're focused on meaningful change to that important behavior. Do you see how we're layering this long sentence we're going to have at the end? So, for example, if you go from 1 request to 2 requests, that's a big deal for a parent, especially. Like, oh my gosh, my kid could only ask for 1 thing. Now they can ask for 2 things. Like, I'm ugly crying. That is such a beautiful thing when that happens. And I've gotten emotional when like some kids make those kinds of leaps. It's the little things like that. It's just, it warms the heart. So if you're privileged to be a part of those little moments, praise God. If you go from 234 requests to 235 requests, and it took 6 months to get to that point, that's not as effective. That's not as significant of a change. It's a change, but like, what are we doing here? On the other hand, what if that one request helps that kid replace their self-injury? Because that one request that they make for help, because they were doing self-injury because they needed help with something, that one request that they taught, I need help, is now replacing self-injury. That's very effective. You see how everything in context here. But essentially, what was the mission accomplished? Did we accomplish what we set out to do together as a team, including the kid and or the adult? So baseline matters, time frame matters, level of change matters, how the behavior effectively improves the life of the person matters. Analytic. This is another one. I'm not going to get into absolutely everything here, but does the intervention have an effect on the behavior? Do we demonstrate functional control through the scientific method? We have to experiment. We're focused on meaningful changes in important behavior, and this part in italics here, that has a function, a reason. And it's not just that it has a reason, and the intervention is functionally related to that reason, so that the change in the behavior happened because of the intervention. It's actually connected, and then showing through analysis, yes, this kid improved because of the intervention. It's very grounding to know what we did was very effective. There's going to be things outside of our control, please. I can't fully account for all the things going on in somebody's life. But if I can show on a graph that a kid improved because that intervention was effective, now I know something that's going to work maybe in this other area of their life. Now I know something that's going to potentially work with other kids that are experiencing the same thing. It's not always across the board, but I've got a pretty good clue now as to what's effective in my clinical work. And I would say then what's more effective as a parent, what's going to be effective in the future when you're able to isolate variables like that. Same thing for the teacher. I know this worked because I withheld everything and then everything went back to the way it was. And then I brought all the interventions back in and everything got better again. And it can be very quick too. There's ethical ways to do that. You wait until like the first sign that the kid's frustrated, and then you put all the interventions back in. That's sometimes all the information you need. You don't need to wait until things get back up to level 11 before you need to put all of the interventions back into place. It can be a very quick test like that, very quick. Generalization. Behavior changes generalize to multiple contexts. So that'd be places, times, people, etc., materials that you're using. So that meaningful behavior change of that important behavior that has a function or reason and is functionally related to that intervention is generalized to many places, people, things, etc. So now I've got 5 dimensions that are now in that sentence. Okay, so we're keeping track. So if a skill can only be done in one context with one person, has it really been taught? If it's a specific skill for only that one person in that person's life, okay, like I can't even think of an example where that's actually the case right now. But in general, generalization, in general, we need to be teaching skills so that they can be done in many different places. Because otherwise there's some crutch, there's some reason that the kid is doing it in one place and not in the others. We got to be wise to that. We got to look around and see why is it happening just here and not in other places? Have I made them so dependent on that one thing that helps them do the skill? Those are some things to think about. ABA myth buster number 6. ABA turns kids into robots with rote memorization of skills. Well, that would be very anti-generalization now, wouldn't it? That is a myth. Can ABA do that? Oh, sure, it can. It shouldn't. It'd be against our ethical code that we have. it would be bad ABA. But no, it's not part of ABA to do that. Do I need to help kids memorize some answers? Absolutely. That's a building block of learning. But I don't want them to stay at memorization. I want them to learn how to give more than one answer. Classic sample, like 2 + 2 = 4 every single time. But if I want to ask the kid, hey, what are some things that are hot? Because I'm trying to teach them some safety skills. Well, if they only say the stove, that doesn't tell them fire, the oven, a heater, the blacktop when it's been out in the sun for forever and it's really hot outside. So you got to wear shoes. Those things matter. Being able to give more than one answer to one question. That's an example of generalization. Being able to walk from one place to another without that favorite staff member. I can't tell you the number of times that's happened with me. I've worked in several special education schools, and the kid would only walk to that room with that favorite staff member. And if that staff member called out, we were sunk. We didn't know what to do because it was totally dependent on the presence of that staff member until we started looking at how that staff member was engaging with the kid. And how do we can't replicate a relationship totally, right? We don't want to reduce people to just what they do, but there's some helpful clues there so that we can create other grounding and therapeutic relationships with other adults in that kid's life. It makes sense to do that. So reflect on, where are you seeing that there is a dependency of a kid on that one adult, and like that adult is their everything. That's not a bad relationship, by the way. It just means that it's an opportunity to look at, why is that relationship so good, and how can we expand that kid's safety net so that they've got more loving relationships in their life. So I didn't expect that to get so deep. That was not in the script. All right. Technological. Procedures described are precise and replicable. This absolutely relates to what we were just talking about. Sometimes on a cheat sheet of how to work with a kid, there might be phrases such as like be supportive, catch him being good, similar phrases to help the staff members know what kind of overall attitudes do I need to be successful with this kid and have a good therapeutic relationship, or a good educational relationship, or a good parental relationship. But they don't specify the specific actions. It's not a bad thing to include those kinds of phrases, but the more specific you are, the more likely you're going to be able to have other people replicate what's working well. So going back to the Johnny example here, when Johnny's only doing the transition with one staff member, are you, as an administrator or a teacher who's in charge of teacher aides, or RE director in charge of CCD teachers, whoever's providing this direct support and is successful, what is that staff member saying specifically? What reinforcer is the staff member offering? What relationship building is that staff member doing outside of that particular transition? And how has that trust been built over time? Because it might take time, and that's okay.
The Director of National Intelligence.
It also relates to questions regarding generalization, like we've mentioned. So then number 7, conceptually systematic. So concepts are consistent with behavior analysis. There's no double meanings in the field of behavior analysis. So for all those that are smiling at the Princess Bride reference up there, I'm not going to do the Inigo Montoya reference in my Inigo Montoya voice, lest I be judged. But I was very happy to find that, because there are, I won't say which fields, because I don't want to get in trouble, But when you've got the same word being used to describe different things, it can lead to a lot of miscommunication among team members. So one of the things that's very grounding for me in ABA is that when I'm talking about reinforcement with other members of the team, including the parent and even the teacher, after we've talked about what the terms mean, and with the staff that I supervise, we're all talking about the same thing. And that's very grounding, and it promotes good communication. I think that's just more generally, we should look at our other fields, other disciplines in that same way. More ABA terms are going to be discussed in part 2 of the webinar series, but it's important to use the same terms. And that's going to contribute to all the other things that we just talked about, especially like being technological, being precise. We should also use words that don't have double meanings. All right. Lastly, compassion. The 8th mystery dimension. Here it's defined as acting with empathy to improve the quality of life of the individuals we serve and their families, as well as to prevent or alleviate current or future suffering. So compassion has actually been implied since the time that the other 7 dimensions were articulated. It was back in 1968. But the authors of this recent article that I'm quoting here argue that compassion is a central dimension that informs all the other dimensions. And I agree. I think we would all agree. So for us as Catholics, we would regard this less of a characteristic and more as a fundamental value that orients and guides the other characteristics. So we can have this phrase here, driven by a motive of compassion. But what we're going to do is we're going to put that at the beginning of our big sentence that weaves all of these pieces of ABA together. So if you want to know what is ABA, it is driven by a motive of compassion. We are focused on meaningful changes in important behaviors that have a function, a reason, and are functionally related to the intervention, are generalized to many places, people, things, etc., with procedures that are precise and replicable and consistent with the concepts of behavior analysis. Now we come to it. What is the Catholic stance towards ABA? Whether official statements or overall attitudes, what about behaviorism? What does the church have to say? Well, ABA, like anything, can be misused. So, like anything, it must be examined in the light of faith. So psychology or medical science, for example, would be other things that we need to look at with a Catholic lens. In the same way that a Catholic application of psychological principles must make distinctions from a purely secular psychology, Catholic application of ABA needs to make distinctions from a secular ABA. So what is the church doing? That can sometimes be a clue. How does the church feel about this? There's at least precedents for different dioceses promoting ABA. In Newark, New Jersey, there's an Attends Mass program. We're going to talk about that in a second in the next slide. There's the diocesan schools of Canada hire many BCBAs. I think Carterman mentioned there's going to be potentially some people from Canada here. Welcome if you're here. Catholic Charities of serving Central Washington, so Washington State, provide ABA services. It's on their website last time I checked. And my parish school, where I am at, actually uses positive behavior interventions and supports, or PBIS for short, which is an ABA approach used in many schools. I'm sure it's not the only Catholic school out there. I would hope not. So that's just a quick sample of the ABA is out there being used in church and church-related settings. In particular, this is incredible. In the Diocese of Newark, New Jersey, they have a program called Attends Mass in collaboration with Caldwell University's master's program in ABA, which helps teach behaviors to demonstrate while you're in church, and it's for individuals with disabilities. In a description of that program, they recommend a Mass mentor, and here's the description. Based on the experience developing the Attends Mass program, Mass mentors are recommended to be either a board-certified behavior analyst or enrolled as a graduate academic in an ABA program and have clinical training in teaching children with autism using the principles of ABA. I have to tell you, my heart was singing when I saw that. And I don't think I'd ever seen the word BCBA or Board Certified Behavior Analyst in the same sentence as Mass before. So I was feeling super validated when I read this. So if you're a behavior analyst in the Zoom call, you know how I feel. But other quotes, very enlightening to read. I think individuals with autism do learn from observing others, but it takes more time than for learners with other disabilities or without disabilities. I think it's a fine claim to make. I don't think it's always true, but so it may not be a dependable method for some learners with autism compared with a systematic method of teaching. Applied behavior analysis is one such method that is very successful with individuals with autism when used appropriately and respectfully. And its principles can be useful in all learning. Here's another quote. Decades of research in the field of learning theory, and specifically in the science of ABA, have made equally clear that individuals with autism are capable of learning new skills, even complex chains of appropriate behaviors, so multi-step skills, like attending Mass. Faith tells us children with autism are worthy. Science tells us they are capable. I love that. A basic premise of behavior programs is that developing behavioral skills provides the opportunity to participate and be part of community. So there's a lot of nice things said about ABA in this, I think. And given the kind things, I would hope that the Archbishop of Newark is not doing or condoning something illicit by allowing this program to exist, or at least be supported by the church. So this brings me, though, to a critical note that I'm going to actually say in every episode, and it's that I'm not advocating for us to seek professional help. I'm sorry, I am advocating for us to seek professional help from licensed and credentialed individuals in the field of ABA, but I'm not claiming that you need to find those services from a Catholic. I would rather you have a behavior analyst who's not Catholic, but is effective and ethical in what they're doing, than to have a Catholic behavior analyst and they're not acting ethically or effectively. A behavior analyst practicing ethically and effectively is going to align a lot more to protecting the dignity of the child and taking your values into consideration. And under our ethics codes, that includes spiritual and religious values. All right. PSA is over. So what is the church's official stance? I've looked everywhere. I cannot find a single official stance. However, I did find one statement from a noted theologian and saint before he became Pope St. John Paul II. Karol Wojtyła wrote a book called Person and Act, and it's not an official statement, but he carries a lot of moral authority. So I want to read off what he says. He says, behaviorism may serve as a descriptive approach to action, but not as a method of interpreting man's actions or acting. Sorry. So this is certainly true of what we talked about earlier with structural behaviorism, but does not account for the claims of radical behaviorism, which includes the thoughts and feelings, the things that are private behaviors beneath the skin. However, I believe what Wojtyła, Saint John Paul II, is referring to is the level of analysis that behaviorism provides. It's limited. It is. It's not the only approach. Behaviorism can be insightful as to why a person behaves in the more immediate sense of the person's world or environment, but not within the wider context of the person's nature and telos, their purpose, which is what I think Wojtyła is saying here. Ironically, he has been such an inspiration for me these past several years, looking into all of these things. But we got to live in the tension. I love this picture because we're so often living in the tension as Catholics, whether it's Catholic social teaching or theology debates or whatever. I just feel like we're always living in tension. Every single debate, Catholic debate out there, or Catholic discussion out there, every podcast episode seems to be living in the tension. And I felt myself living in that tension, wondering, actually, is it wrong for me as a Catholic to work as a behavior analyst? Which might seem kind of out of left field for you all as we've been talking. But for those, especially in the field who are Catholic, there was that I had a quarter life crisis. And some might be able to relate to that. Like, am I doing something that's good? The major questions that I was asking myself, and I outlined some of it in an article I wrote online in my newsletter called The Catholic Behavior Analyst. There's a link at the end of the slideshow. But in it, the questions that were really on my mind and my heart were, am I just manipulating people to do what I want them to do? And then there was like a fact check. Well, teachers kind of change things in their classroom to get the kids to do what they want them to do too, right? So I can't be that bad. But I had that thought, like, am I just manipulating people? Am I missing something in my clinical treatment of my client? Or neglecting something that my faith tells me, specifically about who the person is in God's eyes? And lastly, am I integrated? Am I integrated in my identity as a Catholic, foremost, and as a behavior analyst, secondarily? Not even secondarily. I mean, I'm a Catholic, I'm husband, father, got all my identities, youth apostle. But behavior analyst is up there. And I don't want it to be disintegrated. So what do I do? So I was listening to a Catholic psychologist, Dr. Greg Bottaro, the founder of the Catholic Psych Institute. And he had said something on one of his first recordings on his podcast that I loved. And it really struck me. He said, if you study human behavior, you are looking at an image of God. So that struck me because I was filled with joy that someone mentioned behavior in the Catholic sphere, but also a certain degree of astonishment because I've seen some really tough, sometimes disturbing behaviors. And behaviors encompass both the ordered and the disordered, the good deeds and the sins, the entire spectrum of human action. But I know that behavior is not the only dimension of the person. So I would say we are irreducible to our behaviors, yet our behaviors are an image of God. Some of you still might be like, well, I've seen some behaviors too, and that is not an image of God. Thank you very much. However, as a Catholic behavior analyst, I do truly believe that all our behaviors are indicative of a deeper desire, even the behaviors that don't seem to align with our personal values, or within objective goodness that we learn from our faith. So many, let me skip this part actually. That doesn't make behaviors objectively good. It's just that there's a deeper need that we have, which is being communicated via behavior. So if I see a child who's yelling and screaming, or maybe even engaging in some unsafe behaviors, such as self-injury, it's in a situation where that kid is with unfamiliar people in an unfamiliar place, and there's significant changes in that person's routine. I'm challenged in that moment to see an image of God in this person. And for you all as parents and educators, clergy, whoever you are, and wherever you're encountering these precious gifts from God, do you see an image of God? But how do you reconcile, like, when you're seeing these really tough behaviors? Underneath all of that, with that kid that is really frustrated in that particular situation I described, there's a desire for trust, order, warmth, care, interpersonal connectivity, internal stability, peace, all of these good things. There's a desire for that underneath it all. Children and adults have the same deep desires common to all of us by virtue of our human nature and being images of God. So actions on the surface And even the surface motivations that can be disordered and problematic, that can be true, that can be happening. But the deep desire underlying them are for truth, goodness, beauty, and love. So what should the Catholic perspective be on ABA? ABA is one of the perspectives on, but it's not the only perspective. And it helps us in understanding ourselves better so that we can continue to grow and flourish in virtue and vocation, and to help others do the same. That's the very first thing. And I forgot to mention, so a lot of this is coming from trying to synthesize what the church teaches in the catechism regarding free will, what Catholic psychology teaches, especially locally here we have Divine Mercy University, and they've got a great textbook on Catholic psychology called the Catholic Christian Meta Model of the Person. That's been very grounding for me in my clinical work. What's explained in the Handbook for Catholic Apologetics by Dr. Peter Kreft and Father Tasselli, and just looking at behavior science. That's where this is all coming from, in case you're wondering. Number 2, we have an orderly universe. Everything has a cause. Number 3, we have a limited free will. That's actually a direct quote, limited free will, from Catholic Christian Meta Model of the Person, that is informed and influenced by one's learning history. It's super random, but the force of habit, it's in the catechism that it can even mitigate culpability in the case of certain sins. That, do we pay attention to that? The power of someone's learning history, and holding that in the tension with the free will. We always behave, number 4, we always behave in a physical and spiritual context, never in a vacuum. And number 5, behaviors can be ordered towards goodness or evil, and behaviors can be morally virtuous or neutral or sinful. And we need to keep in mind, we work with individuals with disabilities. And so I'm not talking about moral responsibility for somebody that, God sees the heart and sees the limited, how even some people's free will are even more limited because of those conditions. So I'm not trying to make any moral claims on the actions of those individuals. And some people get defensive about it in our field for that reason. Like, I don't want there to be free will because then I'm responsible for my actions. And I also don't want my clients to be responsible for their actions. That doesn't seem right. Well, it's a half truth. Like, yeah, your client might not be responsible for their actions in the same way, but you as their clinician, you do have probably more exercise of your free will and should bear more responsibility for your actions. Okay. What does our faith offer to ABA? Our behaviors are ultimately oriented toward a relationship with God. That's something our faith teaches us. The ultimate purpose of our behavior is to love God and love our neighbor, the greatest commandment. Full stop. We seek him who is truth, goodness, and beauty. He is love. God also gives us grace, which is his life and love, through prayer and the sacraments. Second thing here, suffering can be redemptive. I think it's a beautiful aspect that our faith can bring to understanding behavior. God can bring meaning and healing through our suffering. Next, God can grace our actions. He can supernaturalize them, as with faith, hope, and charity. I think that speaks to the role of prayer and asking for God's grace to come down into these different situations. I do pray for my clients, not as much as I should be, honestly. But this is a good reminder, being in front of you all, and to be more accountable, to pray for them more often. I need God's grace in this. I think teachers and parents, we need God's grace in this. And the individuals who are learning, the individuals with disabilities, they need God's grace. Family life is sacred and sacramental. That's hugely important in our faith. We're bastions of protecting and proclaiming the goodness of the family. Mom and dad are the first educators of their children. Parents are the first representatives of God to their children. And for this reason, the family is the domestic church. Whether or not I'm sharing the same spiritual or religious background of the clients I'm serving, I'm holding the mom and dad relationship with great esteem and reverence. And I want that relationship to be good and healthy, because that will have an effect on my client, on the kid. The power of our free will in determining our actions. We just talked about that. ABA contextualizes behavior. Catholicism contextualizes ABA. You like what I did there? Let me read it again. ABA contextualizes behavior, but our faith contextualizes the science. And I think it's important to keep in mind. On that note, this is an image of the Catholic Christian meta model of the person. Flagship Catholic psychology school. It's excellent. I'm just a fanboy. I didn't go there, but it was very helpful for me, who did not have that integrative academic background where it was integrated with the faith. So I took this like a dog to water. I was lapping it up. I was loving this, and it's a beautiful book. And to summarize a little bit of it, we as persons have reason and will, and we're designed for interpersonal relations. We sense, we perceive, we cognate, we think, we emote, and we have a body-soul unity. And these are different aspects of who we are. I will say this, though, that's like the context within. Do we look at it as a context and how these different things play off of each other? I think the textbook does a great job of that. But the reason I also bring it up is that I would love to see more of what's going on outside of the person that affects that person's learning history, that person's culture, the audience, who's present in that time, in that moment, the patterns of what happens right before and right after a behavior. We're going to get into some of those practicals next episode when we talk about assessing. And then setting events from earlier in the day, or maybe even earlier in the week, or maybe something traumatic. I know that's something talked about as well in the book. So with those setting events, those things that happened earlier, is it making it more or less desirable to do that behavior? Or is it making it more or less unpleasant to do that behavior? Are we thinking about those things? Some other things our faith teaches us, the importance of morality and behavior. There's a famous quote from Servant of God, Father Flanagan, who's the founder of Boys Town, who served at-risk youth. And he's actually been recently popularized in our field of ABA. And the quote is that there's no such thing as a bad boy, only bad environment, bad modeling, and bad teaching. I think that this is a really important statement. I think it can be taken to an extreme where you absolve a kid of absolutely all wrongdoing. I'm not advocating for that. But, you know, especially with individuals with disabilities, there's so much responsibility on us to be teaching well, to be having a good environment, a good learning environment for the kid. So much on us, so much responsibility. We need God. We need God in that, accompanying that young person. Maturing via conformity to Christ and virtue. We mature through conformity to the person of Jesus in our thinking, our feeling, and our moving, which, incidentally, all of which are behaviors according to B.F. Skinner. Virtues are the predisposition to do the objective good, affect toward objective beauty, and think with objective truth. There is a proper way to develop, and I would say it needs to be examined more in research by Catholic psychologists and behavior analysts and related professionals to examine childhood and adolescent development. And the last thing here, grounding our personal values and ultimate values of truth, responsible freedom for goodness, and love. Values are actually really important in our field, especially when we're working with clients that are more talkative and have more complex things going on. like anxiety, which often co-occurs with autism. But we look at personal values, like what's like a personal value for the person. And an example, here's some examples: adventure, studiousness, mercy, family, self-discipline. There's a big long list of a bunch of personal values you could have. But here's an example: a personal value divorced from an ultimate value. Adventure could be come a vainglory, or insatiable curiosity, or avoidance of the personal relationships that they need to be taken care of, or avoidance of commitment. Adventure can be troublesome as a personal value when it's divorced from truth, responsible freedom, and love. When it is integrated and founded on those ultimate values, you could have adventure being a pursuit of truth. You can have it be related to training the will to do the good, or for delighting in the beauty of God and nature, or giving and giving him praise, therefore, or for growing in deep friendship with fellow adventurers. So it's an opportunity for community. The value-based behavior of adventuring becomes a behavior oriented towards God and how he has made us. That's the importance of ultimate values. So when we're teaching behaviors, are we grounding them in those ultimate values? My belief is that personal values can be loosely categorized into those three ultimate values. And incidentally, they are the ultimate values of my religious community of youth apostles, to which I belong. These ultimate values are echoes of the deepest desires we have. And so there's a quote here actually from the Catholic Christian meta model of the person, where it says, freedom for excellence and flourishing involves growth in the human capacities to know truth and reality, to choose good and to avoid evil, and ultimately to love God and neighbor. And in that choosing good, it's freedom for excellence. So it's freedom for the good. Freedom for the good. And with that, we've got our last slide before the conclusion. Our deepest desires are to love God, others, and ourselves with our heart, seek truth in reason with our intellect, and to act in freedom from sin and for the good with our will. And these things, I think, need to guide us in our future discussions over the next 2 episodes. So that's why it's so important we talk about these concepts, these foundational elements, so we stay rooted in our faith as we discuss behavior analysis. So how are you helping kids and adults with disabilities realize and actualize these desires? And how about in yourself as well? And I need to ask that question to myself too. So parts 2 and 3 of this webinar series is going to, again, be more focused on the practicals, but we got to stay grounded. So I'll leave off with these last 4 bullet points and I'll pass it to Carmen. We should be simultaneously analyzing behavior and praying for the person, graphing behavior and seeing God's image and likeness in the person, intervene systematically and see the person's deepest desires, practice the science, and see with eyes of faith. Live in the tension. All right, Carmen.
Well, thank you so much, Joey. I really feel like you have taught us so much just in this brief time that we've had together, really to learn about the basics of ABA, what it's composed of, how does this relate to our Catholic faith. So right now we want to go ahead, I'm going to stop the recording and I want you to go ahead and either pop your questions in the chat or maybe unmute yourself. We can stop the slide share and then we can have you, there's a hand raise button on the Zoom. So let's use that function and we will try and get to as many of these questions as we can. Also, feel free to email them to us, education@portocharities.org, and we will be able to get those questions to Joey and incorporate them into further webinars or get more information to you. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And Joey, if you want to stop the screen share, we'll be able to take some questions.